I'm Natalie Jolly. I'd like to welcome you today to the APSA Cafe. I'm the chair of our scholarship committee, and the idea for this committee, came to us about a year ago, and we're so excited to have such a big group and to continue to have such interest in what's going on in current Amish scholarship. So thank you for being here today. We do this monthly or almost monthly, or sometimes twice in a month, like this month. So that's exciting. Thanks for joining us. I'd like to begin by acknowledging Andrea Waxmansky. She is a central member of our scholarship committee and the one who manages the technology to make all of this possible. Thanks, Andrea, for ensuring that everything always runs so smoothly here. And if you're joining us for the first time, you're welcome to put your questions in the chat. Caroline has suggested that maybe since there are so many of us, we just kind of keep a digital record of what interests you or what questions you have in the chat, and it will help us just kind of get a sense of what's going on. And I'd like to now just introduce you to Caroline Brock. Caroline Brock is an associate teaching professor of sociology at the University of Missouri-Columbia. She earned a PhD in the field of environment and resources from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2010, in the before times. Her research focuses on agriculture and sustainability in Amish and Old Order Mennonite communities, and she teaches a very popular writing course titled Amish Communities. Sounds like a lot of fun. I came across Dr. Brock's work nearly a decade ago now, when I read a paper she had in JAPAS titled, what do college students have to learn from the Amish? And so still a great paper and one of my favorites, and got me thinking about how we talk about and teach about Amish. So I'm pleased to finally get to meet the author of that piece from so long ago and introduce you to today's speaker, Dr. Caroline Brock, who is here today to tell us more about the JAPAS issue number 9, number 2, our agriculture, environment, and plain people issue. And I'm going to turn it over to her now to introduce our panelists and contributors and tell you a little more about that issue.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm thrilled that there are so many people here, and we want to capture, as Natalie said, who's here and your thoughts, maybe lessons learned, as well as your open questions about the special issue and or just more broadly about working with the Plain people, because we only have an hour here, so we'll only be able to just barely touch on the vast amount of possible things that we could talk about. So I'm hoping this digital footprint will help inform our future as to how we might do this as a collective moving forward. So it was a special honor to work with all the authors of this special issue, and we have a number of them here. Not all of them could make it, but I just wanted to kind of highlight who is here, and we're gonna focus on a couple authors who are able to just give us a few insights from their article, a snapshot of their article, some of the lessons learned from their journeys working with the Plain people, and some open questions for you all. So I know we have, let's see, the folks that we have on, and let me know, because it's, you know, a little bit difficult in the Zoom world to know for absolutely sure who all is here. But we have an author who was able to kind of synthesize some of his work from a couple of decades ago, working with the Plain people on his master's thesis, Dave Hockman-Wart, and give us some insights, timeless insights about how to approach the Amish in terms of research, in some ways that maybe don't work so well that would work with other folks, and some ways that might also inform our work with other folks, non-Amish folks as well. Do you want to just say hi, Dave?
Yeah, hi. It's good to be here.
Great, thanks. And then, so this also helps you too, if you have particular questions for particular authors, you'll know who's on the call. Dr. Shenton, you want to give us a little bit of a shout out? She did some work that gives us some historical perspectives on Plain Anabaptist farmers. And just give a shout out and say that you're here.
Hi, good
All
to be
right.
here. Nice to see all of you.
Yes, thank you so much. And then we also have Danielle Smarsh, I believe, who's here from Penn State Extensions. We've got some service providers, the first time ever, we got some service providers that I was able to coax and convince to take a little break from the field and do the hard work of writing some of their thoughts down from their journeys. Do you mind saying hi from Penn State Extension?
Hello, thanks for having me here today. Looking forward to a great discussion.
Thank you so much. We also have a couple folks that I think might be joining us, so may not be able to say hi formally, but maybe joining us via phone or via not so great internet from the field. So that's apropos working with Amish and Mennonites. We have, I believe we have Richard Hoopla, right, and Vance Haugen out there. So they are out here in some form or another. Thank you, Richard, for waving. Really appreciate it. They gave us some great insights from their work in Wisconsin. So is there any other authors out there before we kind of dive in a little bit more deeply with Brad Bergefurd and Dr. LaBorde's work? I think I might have it on. Give a shout out if you're out there, and I haven't seen you, but would Brad Bergefurd mind? I thought while we did that, we'd actually share the cover of the special issue because I think it's really eye-catching, and it actually captures a little bit of Brad's work with the Plain people, so he can tell us a little bit about his article while we are looking at a little snapshot of his life.
Okay, again, pleasure being with you all today, and I did pull together some pictures, Caroline, so I can share my screen and share some if you'd like. But
okay.
One of them is this, and
Okay, start with this, and we can move to your pictures. How about? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. You want me to go ahead and share screen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah, and as people continue to come on, please do introduce yourselves. Say what your interests are with the Plain people and your background. That'd be great.
Okay, everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, like I said, it's a pleasure to be here today. I am with Ohio State University. I have worked as a specialty crop specialist with OSU Extension for 32 years, and I've done a lot. Actually, my very first interview back in '92 was with a committee of Amish farmers. So that was, I've never worked with them. I didn't grow up around an Amish area or anything. And that very first introduction, before I was even hired with Extension, I was interviewed by a group. And, I've always just thought everybody's the same for the most part. I don't treat anybody any differently, but that was quite the experience being interviewed. And then I accepted, and I was in Geauga County as the county horticulture educator. Up in around Middlefield, one of our, I think it's our second largest community in Ohio. And then I got my statewide specialist position and came down to Southern Ohio. I think I have a map. Oh, there I am again. Thanks, Corey, for adding me to that cover page. But I'm based out of the Piketon Research and Extension Center, which is the southernmost research and extension center that Ohio State has. And just as I accepted this position, I worked very close with Dr. Donnemeyer over the years, and he has always tracked how our population of Amish and Mennonite populations in Ohio. And as I took this position is when we started getting Amish and population moving in and growing down in Southern Ohio. So I just continue to work with the same in the same vegetable arena with the vegetable growers, and a lot of them are Amish and Mennonite. When I was the Geauga County horticulture educator, my first job was turning a bunch of grade B milk Amish farmers that were on that committee to become vegetable farmers, all in a matter of 6 months. They lost their contract with their cheese company. They were no longer taking grade B milk. So they had to do something. They weren't going to convert over to generators and coolers and all that. So that was my first job with Extension, was one, teaching a bunch of Amish dairy farmers how to be vegetable growers, and 2, helping them build a produce auction. So that was quite the experience. And I've been a part of the wholesale produce auctions throughout Ohio that are all backed by Amish communities, whether most are investors, they actually built the facilities themselves, or they're built right in their communities just for they don't have to haul produce to the cities. They can actually market it right there in their back doors, on their farms and in their communities. Some of these are drive-through auctions where the farmers actually leave the produce on the wagons, driving through, and the auctions go ahead. The buyers are auctioneering each individual lot off. Did you want me to go in depth at this time, Caroline?
Just a couple minutes, yeah,
Okay.
of things that come out of your article and just open questions for the audience.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then along with that just comes training and teaching and educating, my regular old extension duties where I teach workshops and field days, and I have a lot of on-farm cooperators, believe it or not, that are Amish and Mennonite farmers that actually put on-farm research trials on their farms. Some of our biggest supporters of our OSU research program, and we hold a lot of our trainings, like I said, on the farms or in the kitchens. A lot of the folks offer up their homes, and we have kitchen meetings with different farmers around the community, and I just go into the kitchen and have an evening program where I'm teaching their pest management or fertility or something like that. When we have large groups that say they need pesticide updates for their pesticide licenses, we'll hold them at local firehouses. That last picture was a firehouse, and this is another one where I'm teaching. Now, some of the communities will watch PowerPoint presentations like I'm giving here, but then others will not. So I just have to know which communication and education method that they prefer in that community. And I either just use all handouts then if they do not like to watch the PowerPoints and the screens, but then some will. But that's probably one thing as an extension agent I need to, and a specialist, I need to be aware of, just be cognizant of the communities that I'm teaching in and how they prefer to have their communication and their education done. This is another pesticide update where I co-teach it with the county extension agent, and this is in a firehouse located right in the middle of their community as well. So there's all my contact information. If anybody's ever in Southern Ohio, I'd like to host you and bring you on down. And but I guess we can go into discussing some of the things from my paper.
Awesome. Yeah, I thought maybe we could just, if people have questions right now for Brad, that's great. Otherwise, I thought maybe we'd have Dr. LaBorde give a little bit of a teaser about his work and open questions, and then start opening it up. Does that sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Right.
Let me end this slideshow.
So Brad is kind of representing produce sector in general, because one of our speakers, Jim, isn't able to be with us. Yeah, Londa.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Brad. It was great to see pictures from other parts of the country as well. I was curious, I just noticed that in one of your slides, you were showing a slideshow. So apparently, and maybe some of the groups you work with, they're okay with seeing projected images. And maybe some aren't, but I noticed at least you showed a picture that they were looking at a projected image. Just was curious.
Yes, correct. And I mentioned that as I was going through that. I teach so many different communities that I need to know their communication preferences. So whether they can watch slideshows, whether they can look at the screen, whether they can't. So I'll just adopt my teaching style. Like that particular group, the two groups that I showed here, the community does allow, their bishop does allow the use of viewing PowerPoint slides. Not video, but PowerPoint slides are fine. But then I have other communities where I just make the handouts. So I'll take the PowerPoint slide, give them the 4 or 6 slides per page handout, and we just teach off of that. So yeah, with so many different communities around Ohio, I really, it makes a little extra work as an extension specialist, knowing who your audience is going to be and how they prefer their education and their communication styles. But I'm just, after 32 years, I'm used to, it just comes natural now.
Yeah, and Brad's article, what he just talked about, kind of highlights some of the structural change where there is more plain people moving into produce for sure. And Jim's article also spoke to that in Missouri, where we have had a lot of growth of produce farmers, and much of that is Amish people. So that's really important. Some of that work is really well suited to the Amish, that sector. Dr. LaBorde can speak a little bit to the importance of modality in slideshows, because he did an actual research project looking at that. And also particularly growing edges, another discerning theme that came out of the issue is that there's some particular areas that maybe has some unique challenges working with the plain people, and that has to do with some of the regulations and the changes that are happening there, and food safety is one of those important touch points. So Dr. LaBorde, do you want to give us some insights and open questions from your article?
Hi, Luke LaBorde. I'm at Penn State University, where I'm a professor of food science in the Department of Food Science. I came here in 1998 with a 70% extension appointment and 30 research, and with the focus of quality and safety of fruits and vegetables. So that's going in all sorts of different directions. I guess I'd have to admit that now that I'm fully tenured and full professor, I can do whatever I want. And so I've started to focus a little bit more on reaching out to the smaller processors and producers, and to find a way to reach out to them, especially in this era of new regulations coming down from the FDA, the federal government. One of the big laws that was passed was the Food Safety Modernization Act, which for the first time has mandated regulations for safe production of produce. But farms were never regulated before like that. But also extending throughout the food system into packing and storage and processing of FDA-regulated foods. And so now, the kind of, in a similar or parallel fashion, we see the Amish kind of expanding in these areas and taking advantage of value-added opportunities, and also trying to maintain their markets in this new climate. So it's kind of imposing down on them. And so we're trying to ease them into this. And so one of the regulations is the produce safety rule, which requires training under a standardized curriculum. This is another friction point here, is that you can't modify this curriculum unless you go through a lot of, well, you just don't want to do that. It's a lot of bureaucracy. And so the question, our research question was, well, how can we adapt this PowerPoint-based usually one day workshop to something that could be presented anywhere, whether there is no electricity or people just don't want to work with computer slides and things like that. Now, we know that's kind of realized that that willingness varies in some parts of Pennsylvania. I always say that in Lancaster County, they're kind of the liberals of the Amish community, but up here in central Pennsylvania, it's perhaps a little more conservative. So like you say, you never know what you're going to get, and like Brad said, it's interesting to see people's faces that I've cited in papers. It's always good. And there's Londa again. Okay. Then the question is, well, how can we have this available for those that would not attend a computer-based PowerPoint presentation? And so, again, another friction point is that it's a very rigid kind of curriculum. You're not allowed to change anything. You can add some pictures and stuff, but you have to have it. So I had to work with the Produce Safety Alliance, which developed the curriculum for FDA, or which had to be approved by FDA, and worked with what I had to make it so that one day, if that curriculum changes, it could be easily modified. I mean, we talked about flip charts and you know, those kind of things. But boy, one little change, we've already had one change to the curriculum. We're okay now, but we anticipate more changes. And so perhaps the approach we took, and maybe I can share this. Let me try this. Let's see if I screw up on this or not. Let's try this. Can you see that? Yes? Okay. This is what we produced, which was a 3-ring binder that had 90% of the same text. So we were okay there. When you start to transfer something from PowerPoint to paper, you have all sorts of technical concerns about, you know, readability and pictures, which were selected so they'd work with PowerPoint, getting them so they're now clear. And so we created this 3-ring binder, a slide set we call it, that is intended to be reusable. So an educator would get a set of these slide books, keep them, they would retain them, just like you retain slides, the slide set, you know. They would use this on the lower left here, the grower training manual, which is required by the Produce Safety Alliance, and it's synced up. So it's just like having a slideshow appear before you on a printed version. Then they can highlight things and keep pace. So, and we found it worked quite well. It just from a subjective point of view, the trainers who helped out with this, I think all found it to be a welcome relief from PowerPoint. And that they could kind of walk around and they knew everyone was looking at the same book and was in sync with the grower training manual. And that we thought it worked pretty well. And they were interested and kept up. We didn't see any issues there. So how do we objectively document that? That's another friction point. That's another challenge, we'll say, is trying to set up some experimental design when you're recruiting Amish and trying to divide them into those who would not use a PowerPoint presentation versus those that would only do that. And so it gets a little fuzzy there, that it's hard to, you know, maybe some selection or bias there. Not quite sure how to make sense of that. But we did have pre and post test data, which the normal or regular curriculum does not do. I think in one of my references was at Iowa, that had developed something like that. But when we did this, we didn't have all that. We didn't have any precedent for doing that kind of survey, that kind of knowledge gain. And so we asked questions before and after, and you know, compiled them, and we found no statistical difference between knowledge gain. Now, why is that important? It's important, yeah, of course, because you want knowledge gain, but also part of the regulation is that if you're going to develop an alternative curriculum, or modality, that it has to be equivalent. Now they just use the word equivalent. They didn't help us out with any definitions, so we were just going blindly saying, okay, we'll do a pre and post test, and that would be. And sure enough, there was some equivalent. It was not statistically different as far as knowledge gains. And then when we were able to pick apart the questions, and you know, look at demographics and pick apart some of the individual responses to questions, you could see that there's some clear patterns about areas that they knew about farm food safety. And I should say farm food safety is also called good agricultural practices, and it's practices to prevent contamination of fresh produce in the field and during post-harvest. So looking, they're knowledgeable about some areas early on about agricultural water and the potential for contamination, different areas about manure risks, and even post-harvest sanitization. And we attributed that to, because this isn't the first time they've come across this. We've been doing these kind of classes before this standardized curriculum came about. So they had some knowledge ahead of time. There were some other areas where they identified some areas that we're going to have to follow up on. And that gives us some idea about how to continue this into the future. So we make the statement that it's clear that the single one-day training, which is mandated by FDA, is just not adequate. I think everybody who teaches the standard curriculum agrees with that. But this is what the people of FDA handed down to us. And so we have to work around that. But there are many things we can do after this and focus on some key areas, such as treating wash water so that it doesn't contain harmful bacteria, things like that that we're going to have to follow up on. I think another, I'd say thank you, Carolyn, for your comments that really pulled out some thoughts that I didn't really have when I started this. Was we stated that there are some issues about when you teach the Amish, this is just my speculation, that sometimes, first of all, we got a variation in scores. Some people did really, really well, some people not so well. And there's a feeling that, well, maybe some people think, well, I don't usually play a role of being the expert here. I know I can rely on so-and-so if I have a question, and I can get that information. So because of their, linkages that they have, Jeff calls it the Amish internet. And so they're all connected. One thing also made a comment about women, that only a few women attended these sessions. And that's typical from what I hear of a lot of Amish workshops. Yet there's a lot of record keeping required. And sometimes the woman might be responsible for making sure all the checks are in place and they're filling out the right forms and all that kind of stuff. And the men might prefer to be out in the field. But they don't tend to participate in the workshops. And so the question was, well, how can we encourage that kind of participation in the future? So I guess, yeah, read the paper. You read more about it, but that's my summary pretty much.
Thank you so much, Dr. LaBorde.
Oh, I should say one more thing. The I don't know, am I still showing this thing?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I'm getting distracted. This on the paper itself, we describe this what we call the slide set. We have a bunch of these piled up in our storage, and they are available to those who want to teach this course. You have to be certified by the Produce Safety Alliance to at least one person to be a leader. But these we're giving out at no cost, just mail, and you can try it out. Remembering that you keep the slide set book so you can reuse it at a later time. We actually, when we did it, we set one out for 2 people that they could share. They'd each have their own training manual that they could, highlight and all that stuff, but they could share the slide set book. So we also developed some flip charts for on-farm training, because the regulation specifically states that workers on the farm have to have a certain level of training. And so they have that then, and we pretty much give those out at every workshop. Again, those references to that website, which talks about them, and if you're interested in ordering that, that's on that website. So there you go.
Thank you so much. All right, well, I should say there was one more author I neglected to give a shout out to, and that's Nicole Jorder. She's also on the call. So she's out there and can certainly wave hello. So should we open it up? So you can ask questions for Dr. LaBorde or Brad or any of the other authors that are on the call, or just questions in general that may spark about working with the Plain people. I know we're all working in different areas. So for instance, only some of us are working in food safety, but I think there's some transferable issues that we're all working with. Yes, for sure. So for instance, Dr. LaBorde talked about ongoing, like the structure that you're kind of handed down, right, to some extent, in terms of food safety with those, with the trainings. But then there's to some extent some agency that we have that we can kind of tweak things as we go, like with the modality and such like that. So any of those kinds of issues. So does anybody want to vocalize some of their questions? That
If Jeff Stoltzfus is a co-author, if he has anything to add or if I messed up anything.
Yes, please. Co-authors, by all means, feel free to chime in. They also may have questions for you. So you can put questions in the chat box. Please do, by the way, so then we have some of those sense. What is the burning issues? What are the bees in your bonnets that you're really thinking about? I think that will help us all.
I guess one thing I did not mention from all my years of working with the Amish and Mennonite produce farmers is I see myself today in extension being a cheerleader, a proponent for these clientele, because when you talk to administration or you talk to folks on campus or even folks that don't work with these types of clients, you know, they just think, oh, we can do a Zoom meeting or we can do it online or we can do, you know, have PowerPoints all the time, or, you know, they can just pick up the phone and call. But, you know, then I always have to stick up for my farmers and say, no, we can't just go all online and we can't have podcast. It's just, we're going to leave out a bunch of my clientele. So I think folks get a little irate with me always sticking up for my farmers, but that's just, we have, and it's getting tougher and tougher as extension moves to more online types of trainings. And, you know, even fact sheets today, they're all online. We don't have fact sheets in the county offices no more. So I will copy the fact sheets and take them to the farmer's farm or take them to the produce auctions. And a lot of our produce auctions in the state, we have a big rack of all the common fact sheets. We went ahead and print them off and put them in the auctions for the farmers have easy access to do them, so, or to get them. So I guess, yeah, I'm just a proponent and stick up for my Amish farmers.
Yes, and some of the articles speak to that, especially during COVID. That was a particular issue. So voicemail updates, some folks in Wisconsin wrote about that, about forage quality, and Penn State talked a lot about their voicemail updates and found that other people, not just Plain people, were making use of those during the pandemic. We got some questions. Does anybody want to vocalize their questions that they put them in the chat box?